Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Sunrise. It is this Thursday morning. I'm Chamberlain. What's up?
Oh, yes, it's a beautiful Thursday morning. As he said, we're coming live from Lagos.
Yep.
I'm Kayode Pichele.
And I'm Ayo Makide. Good morning and welcome to Sunrise Daily.
Yes, indeed. So today we are one of those days where we take you through the dailies, and Richard Mama joins us this morning. He's the editor and publisher of the Difference Daily. Well, different headlines we've got this morning, Mr. Mama, with different dailies. And so, well, let's start with Vanguard today. Wakili OPC members charged with murder, arson. Police has twisted narrative. OPC. So it did appear as though there was always going to be a twist to these kind of stories, especially given how it went, for those who have followed it. But for you, I mean, you certainly would have kept a tab on this one, I reckon. How do you see this?
Yeah, you are right. It was always going to be controversial because you have a controversial nation at the moment. So we've got to get back to that discussion.
Controversial nation.
Yeah, you know, they say
Yeah.
can two work together except they agree? There's no agreement in the nation.
But we've been working
we've got to have
together
an
for
agreement.
how many? Over 50 years now, isn't it?
Yeah, 50 nominal years. You know, there were issues about those years from the beginning. There was a conference that did not quite settle the issues of a coordinated nation. And I think we've got to return to that.
Okay. So this, because given the narrative, the perspective of the OPC, they think that the police has twisted this narrative. So one wonders the kind of message and how all those other locals will respond to this one, because you just might, yeah, the headlines may be what it is, but, you know, we just never know. From your perspective, seeing all of this, is this likely, and to what degree, the kind of reactions that it would generate? Or did they say, look, as long as the law is taking its course, if you go to the courts won't give you what you don't ask for. And the courts, if you don't prove your case properly in the courts, you won't get judgment. Should there be some hope in that regard?
No, I think the problem is a lot more fundamental because, you know, if you go write an examination, there is, you know, WAEC or JAMB or which of the examination bodies gives you, you know, a scheme of work, some syllabus that you've got to study. Now, the expectation is that you are going to answer questions based on that, and that your examiners are going to examine you based on the texts that are prescribed for that purpose. The challenge we have now is that we are not running on the same template. So every issue that comes to the table is controversial. So we've got to first get some basic agreement. You know, when people talk about a new constitution, a referendum, and restructuring and all of those systems, I think that's what they are pointing at. We've got to sit on the same table. We're in the same studio today because we have agreement to be in the studio today. You know, I can't just barge in on Channels. You know, that's the point. Channels is a constituted structure. Channels has to invite me for me to be able to come over. If I'm not invited, I'm a gatecrasher.
Especially when you're not coming to disturb restructuring Channels. So it's allowed. We'll let you pass.
You know, it's interesting that you bring this, you know, twist to this whole thing. But there's a cardinal question that I think Chamberlain raised in this conversation. On the one hand, the police has charged, at least there is an allegation yesterday on the front page about Wakili being charged for certain offenses. On the other hand, is the angle of the OPC also being arrested or charged, you know, with murder and arson this morning. The angle here is the responsibility or the intervention of the locals in ensuring a safe nation. Do you see a risk in, you know, us not engaging or not gaining the confidence of the communities, or you think this is just a warning to locals to, I don't know, how do you see it?
No, it's a major point. You know, it's a major point. I had part of the discussion with Governor Masari last night where he was talking about the fact that there is also a need for state police, you know, in that sense. And then, you know, he was asked the question about Hey, so why has it not started? The truth about it is that, when you have power, power comes with responsibility, it comes with temperance, and power is diffused. So what we have now is that ordinarily, every human being has some degree of power over some space. It's personal space, in that sense. And then you now go to the family space, go to the communal space, you now go to local government, states, and federal, The point is that you must have a structural arrangement that permits for every level of power to be assessed. So you're now having a conflict between community power, and federal power in that sense, community power and federal power. Now, the mediation point would be to have state power, in the security systems. Now, until you have that, because if you have constitutions that are federal, like in the United States, the FBI, the federal police, does not just barge in, on the provinces and the territories, as it were. There's got to be some structured separation. This is where you stop, and this is where the next party comes in, and it's got to be organized. Because you now have a situation where there's been a breakdown of the security infrastructure, if you will put it in that way. A lot of people feel helpless and happiest. They have been killed, they have been attacked, they have been harassed, they have seen inadequate response to it. And so they have decided now to respond by setting up their own systems, their own responses, and those responses are not being integrated and accommodated in a proper formal sense as quickly as it should be. If you ask us to wait for the end of the national conference, we'll remember the other conference, that was held before and then it was scuttled. What is the guarantee that this conference would finish and finish with some outcome? So this is more urgent, that you've got to deal with, separating and structuring the security infrastructure of the country to accommodate for the diversities of security inputs that would address the security challenges of the country today.
Part of the point I was trying to raise is that, and speaking about principle of separation of powers, it may come to play here with respect to the judiciary, because there may just be questions as to the fate that people will have in the judiciary, because if they're saying that police twisted the narrative that's ascribed to the OPC, the courts, this is where, people, or they may look to say, look, if they are fabricated cases, you expect the courts to actually see through some of those things. But I guess we'll have to just wait and see how that plays itself out. But moving on to some of the other stories, this at the bottom strip of the Vanguard newspaper: interagency rivalry, envy fueling insecurity in Nigeria. And it's coming from civil defense boss. Says bandits in Nigeria have international sponsors. Is this music to the ears, or, well, sound bites? We heard this before, but what then? So, what do you think?
It is disturbing.
Which part?
Both.
Okay.
The first point about interagency rivalry.
But the NSA says a similar thing.
Yeah,
a couple of days ago.
No, but the truth about it is that if you don't have interagency rivalry, then why is intelligence not coming out as appropriately as it should go across, the spectrum?
We raised this particular point to some security agencies, and they said, look, it's not that they don't have those details. They have intelligence. They pass it on. But it depends on what the person at the other end does with the intelligence that's been passed to them.
Yeah, and the person at the other end has not been sanctioned, which comes to the point that we have a coordination crisis.
The authority in this case, it could be the governor, it could be the president, that kind of person.
No, the kind of person that should address such issues, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, because if government is a coordinate. A president was elected, and the country is under his watch. The security agencies report to the president through the National Security Advisor, through the Minister of Defense, and all the other interfaces. But at the end of the day, the buck stops on one table. And that table now has all kinds of support services, chief of staff, and XYZ. So what we are having now is that someone is permitting too much laxity in the system for whatever purpose. And this laxity is now coming forth as, failures in the system that affect people. Remember, we're talking about Nigerians. When a governor has 220 security details and he luxuriates in...
220?
about that number. That was what we were told during the Obiano second term election when the security details were withdrawn. That a governor, a state governor, has 221 security details comprising the different services. That was the information as at the time of that election. So when a governor has that comfort, he doesn't understand that the man at the bus stop does not have that. Does not have that. So they live in a world that is different. Meanwhile, we're dealing with 200 million Nigerians that are largely insecure.
All right, well, I associate this one. Let me just breeze through. Lagos sets up Jakonde Leadership Academy. Guys, we've been talking about the leadership recruitment process. We'll see what impact this will have on politicking in the state, for instance. And then above the lead story, FG must probe missing, in parentheses, $1 billion arms fund. That's ascribed to Fallon. The fact that you even hear, I said, wait, missing? This is $1 billion, guys. $1 billion, and we say it's missing? What a country. That's Vanguard today.
Interestingly, the Nigerian Tribune leads with a $1 billion story. FG to rehabilitate Port Harcourt Refinery with $1.5 billion. You see Governor Wike saying, I will not rejoice yet. We have had enough promises. This kind of ties back to the talk about, sanctions. Things were meant to have done a certain way. Yeah. It didn't happen. Time and again, it keeps happening. But, when you see this lead story, in fact, that it's expected to come up 90% by the end of next year, and then eventually in 44 months it's meant to be done. Are you excited?
I am not.
Oh, you're like Wike too?
I am not. I am not because just like Wike, there have been several promises. I am reminded that there were attempts and there have been attempts over time. But for me, more structurally is the fact that what is the program for the oil sector, and oil refining? Okonjo-Iweala was speaking just about 2 days ago and saying that, hey, watch it, by 2025, that's some 4 years' time, the first of European nations are going to be saying we don't want fossil fuels. In 4 years. In 4 years, some nations are going to say we won't buy fossil fuels from anywhere in the world. Now, others have, 6 years, 8 years, 10 years span. But the truth about it is that beginning from some 4 years period, this product, is going to begin to go out, in terms of its global competitiveness.
But, petrol is just one of the derivatives from crude oil. There's so many out there. So maybe petrol will not be in fashion. I mean, there's a lot of others that you can actually sell. So in that light, don't you still think this is a good idea?
No, I think the point is that we keep driving the narrative in the point of selling to earn. This economy and this nation would not grow proper structure. One of the biggest challenges we have is in Nigeria is demographics. Our population has been growing. Across the past 60 years, we have added over 100 million people. Across another 50 years, we are going to add another 100 to 200 million people. You are going to have to feed them. You are going to have to take them into the 22nd century. That means you are going to have education, you are going to have fitting healthcare. Now, look at COVID, for example. There may be a few more COVIDs down the line, God forbid. How are you going to address it?
So you'd rather this money be put into education, economy, rather than put it in a refinery?
No, I think there's a simple answer to refining. The simple point is that the Dangote refinery is already processing, and the second option is that the NNPC, as considered today, has become a problem for the nation. By the time you keep pumping resources into the NNPC, what is the game plan? Are you going to unwind the NNPC? Because we've got to now begin to think of restructuring the NNPC so that it can be in position, to serve the nation. It is not serving the nation at the moment.
Yeah, seems restructuring is across board. There are a couple of other stories, really. You see Labour to FG saying it's not true you subsidize electricity tariff with 50 billion naira monthly. implies the government is lying on that one. And right under the big picture, just before we wrap up the paper, drama in Senate as Northern lawmakers frustrate bill for Armed Forces Service Commission. You must have caught that debate, heated debate at the National Assembly, especially at the Senate. What do you make of it?
No, I think it's messy. I think it's messy. And, you know, this is coming just after the discussion about the diaspora, you know, the Benue IDPs, and then the diaspora intervention. I think it's messy. You know, we are playing games with big issues. And God forbid if we don't sit down and address them as it were. Because the bill that Senator Ibori brought in yesterday was an innocuous bill. It says, you know, harmonize these systems with the Constitution and give the nation some better sense of confidence in terms of how these systems work. So by the time you now had to get into a division, now remember this is the minority leader and the Senate president. By the time you now get into that division, what you are saying to the world is that there is distrust, you know, because by the time the Senate president is supposed to rule on the basis first of proven and demonstrated integrity. By the time the minority leader says, I fault your ruling because I suspect that it is skewed, what he's simply saying is that I can't find integrity in this house.
Okay.
And it's important that our National Assembly is seen and known to have integrity.
Interesting angle. Well, the Guardian newspaper leads this morning, again with billions. After $25 billion on maintenance, FEC approves new $1.5 billion for PH refineries. I talked about it already. FG's move to rehabilitate refinery, one of APC's empty promises, says Wike. Stakeholders insist refinery may remain drain pipe. 3 refineries processed 0 crude but cost the nation 10 billion naira in June 2020. Reps to probe alleged neglect, diversion of crude oil at Warri Refinery. Could go on this, but we've spoken so much about it already. Right beside the name, picture you see on the front page there, Southern Middle Belt leaders give terms for continued stay in Nigeria. Is this a threat or a call again for restructuring?
I think it's a negotiation, and negotiations are legitimate. I think that's what it is. And I think that we should listen and sit down and discuss, because those groups and indeed a number of Nigerians are sufficiently aggrieved.
Okay, Daily Trust is the next one we've got for you here. Apprehension as FG approves fresh 570 billion naira for Port Harcourt Refinery. So to fund repair with IGR loans, 3 oil facilities gulp 1.5 trillion naira in 5 years. Look, when is the apprehension, you think here? I mean, any pointer, any implication to, you see any apprehension whatsoever? Right, well, maybe until people read it and see what they might have on that informed that caption, apprehension. Minimum wage bill, step towards devolution of powers, ascribed to El Rufai. And this talk about devolution of powers, I know you alluded to it in some time this morning. Do you think that, is it really taken with serious intent, or is usually seen largely from politics, from those who you have heard talk about it? Did they actually see the economic need or the essence of why this call is?
No, I think it's a major point of concern, because when we see the way power is structured and organized in the country, what comes to me is that we have 2 nations. We have a nation of those who make it into power and a nation of those who are outside power, in that sense. And for those who make it into power, the perquisites, the lack of accounting structures and all that, cocoon them in such a way that they are not responsive to the real issues, as we see them, on the streets, as it were. So for them, principally, it's a game. But the point is, there's got to come a point where we've got to have some agreement in terms of saying, hey, this is more than a game. This is about lives. This is about livelihoods. This is about people. And so I think, the plea we would make is that those in power should become a lot more responsible in their own enlightened self-interest. Because if they don't, and you get into, for example, we had NSAS towards the end of last year. That was the street speaking to power.
And speaking about the street speaking to power, there's a little headline here. It may have been talked in here, but it's of equal importance. NSAS, police damaged my spinal cord over 20 naira. That's ascribed to a victim. And these are some of the things you read in the dailies or hear. In fact, this NSAS across the country, the panel, it just reveals and uncovers a lot of ills. And they all went unchallenged. Even if not for this panel that was set up, you may not have even heard many of these horrific stories that we hear now. But how important or significant in terms of correcting things moving forward do you think all these panels have been?
No, I think the panels are good. They reveal the fact that there were issues that we were not even discussing. We're not discussing. As a nation, that's the point about discussions. If you discuss, you can find out what the issues are. So the panels are good. They are bringing out revelations. It's becoming very glaring that there were abuses, systemic abuses, that were not being addressed in the proper sense of it. Someone being incarcerated for 6 years without, any, iota of, justice or systemic, in that sense. So I think it's important that those panels reveal as much. The next thing is, what are we going to do with the panels? Because, in the short term, a few people will get compensations. There will be a few more issues that will be stretched a bit while. But NSAS was not just about those abuses as it has to do with, the police infrastructure. It was a statement saying that Nigeria, you don't have your systems right, and you better sit up and, put your systems together. And I think that's how it pans into the whole discussions about those that govern us and those of us who are governed. We've got to come to an agreement, because it is that agreement that produces the synergy for which great nations are built. And Nigeria is potentially very great, very, very great nation.
Oof. Let's take a look at Nigerian News Direct. I mean, it's quite instructive to remember that Nigeria is a great nation. This is a lead story for Nigerian News Direct. Buhari approves 2.047 trillion naira for NNPC refineries in 6 years. Nigeria is a great nation. That's my addition. As FEC approves $1.5 billion for Port Harcourt Refinery rehabilitation. That's on page 16. I mean, we've talked at length about that. And there's this one brewing. Hijab controversy turns bloody in Ibori, Kwara State. That one also on page 2 of Nigerian News Direct. Let me just take one more. ICPC arrests ex-JAMB registrar Professor Ojeride over 900 million naira fraud.
Can you beat that? What do these guys do? Sometimes you ask, what is going on? Well, look, guys. Just with these are two critical issues.
You're here to ask questions.
But unfortunately, yeah, we can ask questions of those who are in positions of power. If someone has filtered 900 million, we'll have to ask questions.
And it's
of
really
kind of circumstances, So it's really. But what's this hijab controversy from what you've seen?
Yeah, hijab is an unfinished question. Hijab is an unfinished question. Hijab is a legitimate mode of dressing, as enshrined in the Quran.
Yep.
So those that would wear hijab would wear hijab. But by the time you start interfacing, there's this thing about the separation of religion and state. If you cannot separate, then you've got to be able to put in place control systems to ensure that there is no interface. And it's unfortunate that school children are being caught in the middle of this whole crisis.
And the buck stops at the table of the governor. He's the chief security officer. He has to ensure that things go right. So if you go wrong, of course they'll blame the governor because he's the person who should ensure that things don't go wrong. So they'll x-ray all his actions because you can imagine what the children, innocent children who are just supposed to go to school and go back home, who have been playing together, and then they see this kind of thing. What kind of mindset? What kind of... Mr. Mama, we thank you, as always, for coming on this morning. We're back in a moment. Don't go away. Well, yes, indeed, that was reports about the visit of the chairman, CEO of the National Drug Law Enforcement Agency, retired General Buba Marwa, who did pay a visit to the office, that's Channels TV, and then highlighting some of the ills and challenges, how they want all hands to be on deck to ensure that this fight, this challenge we've got of drug abuse in the country. Well, guys, this is it's an area, an aspect that has generated and will continue to generate a lot of issues in terms of what's happening to the country. How did we get where we are? What are we doing at the moment? How do we ensure that, you know, we improve given where we are? And the stats coming through are not in any way helpful. And you know the thing about some of these things, I don't know who it was that was saying the other day that part of what has kept some people going on in this country is because they don't look at the stats. But some of those who look at the figures and keep looking at the statistics just keep asking themselves, oh dear. They see where all of this is headed as a result of the stats. And as far as the drug abuse scenario is concerned, it is not looking good. If you've got over 14 million drug users in this country, well, this is...
On Saturday, we had a conversation with his media, his director of media. Yeah. And he mentioned 14 million drug users, you know, that data has shown. And one person tweeted and said that figure is abysmally low.
Whoa, abysmally low?
The person said,
I don't use it, so I wouldn't.
The person said, it was a tweet. The person said, look, that's the record you have. Yeah. But there are so many you will never be able to trace or track. And there are so many of them all over the nation. So if we're able to track that we have 14 million users, then that only speaks to one thing. Those are the ones we can trace. And you've also heard security of agencies, you know, it was his director of media that was also telling us, say that when they raid the hideouts of, you know, the bandits, criminals and all of that, they don't just find cache of arms and ammunition. They also find drugs.
Yeah, they're usually under the influence.
So that underscores the critical role of the NDLEA in contending with the issues of insecurity that we have. Remember, the NDLEA is one of several security agencies in the entire security architecture of the country. So for such an agency that's responsible for ensuring people do not act ridiculously under the influence, to be denied of funds, as the NDLEA chairman, you know, said before the National Assembly, to be so demoralized, as he said, it was a comatose agency that he met. It speaks a lot about how seriously we are interested in fighting insecurity.
Absolutely. It reminds me of that analogy, the good versus evil analogy we used some days ago when talking about this. I mean, you can't underfund good in its fight against evil. You need to ensure that good, in this sense, is well funded. I mean, you don't want good to compromise in the face of evil because evil looks more lucrative in some sense. I hope you're with me on this one. But, you know, I think it's fundamental to always go back to the foundation. Why do people use these drugs, for example, especially young people? I saw some stats in the dailies, I think it was yesterday or 2 days ago, that about 4 million Lagosians use drugs. So, and I was thinking, wait a minute, so that's 1 out of every 5 Lagosian uses drugs. That's huge, by the way. So, and if someone would come out and say, well, that's even inadequate, it doesn't capture the picture as well. So we need to go back to the basics. Why exactly are people using this? I mean, why does it seem to be on the rise per day? Is it as a result of I don't know, depression? Is it, I mean, some are saying COVID also induced this, the fact that, I mean, the lockdowns and the rest. So we need to understand why people use this. By the way, this is in no way a given excuse for drug use, but clearly there is a reason why people use this. They won't use this if they feel it won't help them. So I want to understand it, and you wanted to say something.
Yeah, I mean, why do people use drugs? Clearly, ask the question, extend the question. Why was the NDLEA set up in the first place? Remember, it's a drug law enforcement agency. Set up in 1989. It means that drugs were a problem in the 80s. And the government said, in the way to nip this in the bud was to set up an agency to enforce our drug laws. And over 30-something years and counting, what have we been able to do with such an agency? Strengthened it or dissipated it? There was a time Nigeria was a transit nation. Again, I reference the information given to us by the Director of Media of the NDLEA. Said Nigeria is not just a transit nation anymore. Yeah. Nigeria is now a destination. And it is clearly, you know, even if for nothing, even if for no reason at all, for the fact that we have a drug law agency, for the fact that we have a problem with drug use in the country, for the fact that these issues are clearly there, and for the fact that we have a national security architecture, and each agency is supposed to play a specific role. Question then is, what have we been doing with the NDLEA to ensure that it performs its statutory obligations?
Right, so there's the enforcement part, right, which is very important in this fight. But there's also the understanding, I mean, what is responsible for this part? Because I think to a large extent, I mean, when we talk about insecurity, you always say that, you know, we're fighting it as opposed to preventing it. So it's always important to know, well, can we even prevent this in the first place? And I'm glad that the NDLEA has talked about, you know, some of the other arms of it. It's not just the, what we call the kinetic approach now. It's a term we've been throwing around a lot. There's a kinetic and the non-kinetic, in some sense, approach also by the NDLEA, because it's the fight is a whole gamut. I mean, yes, you can fight it on the street, you can enforce, you can confiscate, you can destroy, but there's still people that demand for this thing. So you need to understand why there's a demand in the first place, because if the demand keeps rising, the supply would always rise up to meet it.
And what kind of drugs do people demand? You can talk about tramadol all you like, but don't forget that there are also the white powders and the other liquids and the rest of them, and they are not cheap.
Well,
so
you know, guys,
that gives you an idea.
I remember several years ago, even while in school, I did a little piece about this. You just went to some bus stops and, you know, my mindset changed about what you see on the roads, because almost over 90% of the guys who drive or use, the drivers of the yellow buses and their conductors are usually under the influence
of one drug or
and they see it as normal. So before you react to any of them on the streets, just remember, they are usually under the influence.
They are more than one person.
Let me even shock you more. Some of them purchase these drugs, these substances, right in the presence of security officials. I mean, they're not unaware of these things. At the bus stops, at the joints, at different places, you'd always find some sort of security presence. But most times they turn the blind eye. Why? Those are the questions we need to
Well, it's a challenge. So I did put in a few questions to the DG. He's got a huge task on his hands. So he needs a lot of hands to help out. He needs everyone as much as possible, as many hands as possible, to see what they can do, because there's so many issues about this. But here is what he said at the time.
Okay.
Well, I haven't seen the situation from given all the health. Now you are chairman of the NDLEA. Tell us, what is the enormity of the challenge?
Nigeria is in crisis of drug use. That's the simple truth, and we must accept it. First, you have to accept when you have a problem before you you deal with it. The happy thing is that the president, President Muhammad Buhari himself, has the political will and is committed towards ridding the nation of drug use. And I think this was obvious from PASIDA, the Presidential Advisory Committee, which he set up for the elimination of drug abuse, which I chaired. Now that gave me a good inkling, but of course, when you climb the saddle, you see more. There are 15 million Nigerians that are using drugs. Of those, 10 million are using cannabis and the balance opioids. Now, there are so many reasons, of course, poverty, peer pressure, the usual suspects, those reasons are there. But there's a need for a total society approach to deal with this issue. The NDLEA is indeed the lead agency. It has been a neglected agency for long. That's one of the key problems that we found. But we believe and trust that with the political will of the president, we are coming back, as witnessed in the last 2 months, with the huge seizure that we have been able to achieve. The men are basically good. The officers and men of the NDLEA, they are the same ones that are making the seizures. They are trained. Our operations are intelligence-led. We don't act blindly. We work with our partners. So, yes, the problems are enormous, but they are solvable.
Well, you have set up 34-man special advice policy. That's all. Now, in addition to all, and the NDLEA keep saying, if you not have support health structure to deal with, for instance, those
No. It has to be total. Everyone has to play his part. And the issues, the area that you mentioned, has to do with the drug use, drug demand reduction. The health institutions that are required, like the rehab centers, we have to have sufficient. Right now, they are insufficient. People don't even know where they are. Those that exist are too expensive. So that is one area that effort has to come basically from government, and the treatment also is key, without which you cannot address the problem. There's aftercare also. Government has to play a very important role. It's the main actor in this case. Most of our own activities, of course, are on drug supply reduction, but it has to go together with the drug demand reduction. That is facing the addicts themselves, the drug users themselves. You have to treat them in facilities. You have to equip them for the life after. I did something similar in Lagos with the area boys at the time. Thousands of them who were high on drugs and were petty criminals and so on and so forth. We put them through rehabilitation, taught them skills so that they can earn a living as decent people. Otherwise, they'll go back. So that's one of the challenges, that a drug addict has to be properly managed or he'll come back.
These are some of the things within your control. Some are not. The unemployment rate, for instance, according to data from the National Bureau of Statistics, youth unemployment as of 2020 stands at 14.2%, the highest for some years now. How do you deal with that?
The government must marshal macroeconomic policies that will deal with poverty. And I'm aware that the president had indicated a proposal, I think, for 100 million Nigerians over the next 10 years, which I'm sure succeeding governments will continue. That is one of the steps. Poverty-ridden societies globally have been tied to drug abuse because of the frustration, the hunger, because when you take drugs, those who, they don't get hungry and they get happier. So they go that way and become addicted. So the issue of poverty has to be dealt with by the government.
Finally, what do you tell those who say, well, I've heard about problems, the drug problems in Nigeria, but it's not my problem?
Well, they better realize that it is everybody's problem, because now the drug problem facing us does not discriminate between tribes, between North and South, between Muslim and Christian, culture and tradition. Everybody, and now every community in Nigeria has drug abuse. Every community. So if in your own family there's nothing like drug abuse and you think that's the end of it, you better be prepared, because it will soon be in your community and then to your neighbor, and you don't know. So you have to stop it from afar. So it's everybody's problem. Secondly, the criminalities everywhere. Now, you know, every day on TV, criminalities. 300 kids kidnapped, 200 kids kidnapped, insurgents, bandits, and so on. All of them use drugs. All of them use drugs. I've interacted with my military colleagues who are engaging the insurgents, and they have told me that in the camps where they captured from the terrorists and bandits, they always find the remnants of drug cartons and containers and so on and so forth. So they use drugs. And also, after they've captured some of them and back in the camps, they have these withdrawal symptoms after 2 days. So what I'm saying is that the propensity for the insurgents and bandits and kidnapping that is going on and spreading has an underlying drug tone to it. So it affects everybody. You don't know who is going to be kidnapped next. So we have to all put our hands together and intercept and interrupt the availability and access to drugs.
Thank you very much. I wish you all the best.
Thank you.
All right, welcome back. Well, we're just going to go ahead and bring in two lawyers this morning to take a look at some of the issues that are, well, yeah, it's something that's been broached previously. Dr. Kaide Ajulo joins us. He's the managing partner, Kaide Ajulo & Co. He's also the executive director, Egalitarian Mission for Africa. We also do have Monday Obani, former second vice president of the Nigerian Bar Association. Gentlemen, good morning, and thank you for joining us today. We're talking about these funds that were returned from the UK. Mr. Ajulo, let's get your perspective first. You seem to have a sharp disagreement with those who think that these funds should be returned to Delta State because the state claims, well, this funds was pilfered from the state, so why shouldn't it go back to the state?
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Chamberlain, and good morning. My sharp disagreement, as you said, may not be not unconnected with the fact that one has the experience of this matter right from 2006 when this matter started. I say this from the point of the fact that from the inception, the group led by Chief Edwin Clark, OFRCON, that is Delta State's Headers and Leaders Forum, petitioned the EFCC, that is the beginning of this matter, saying that their governor, outgoing governor, has taken money over $1 billion. That is about 159 billion naira at that time. Today it should be about 600 billion naira. And then the EFCC, they told them that it will be difficult for them to try it because according to Nova, then he said his hands are tied. And what the forum did is to ask us to proceed to court and to compare the EFCC.
Okay. All right, Mr. Ajulo, just give us a moment. We'll come back and sort a couple of things out, so please stay with us.
A two-term governor of Delta State, Mr. James Ibori, in February 2012, was accused of stealing 250 million United States dollars from the Nigerian public purse. He pleaded guilty to 10 counts of money laundering and conspiracy to defraud at Suffolk Crown Court, London, and in April of 2012, he was sentenced to 13 years imprisonment, but was later released in 2016 after serving just 4 years behind bars. This signing of Memorandum of Understanding between the British and Nigerian governments is for the return of 4.2 million British pounds said to be from friends and family members of the former Delta State governor.
These funds that we have secured the return of so far are from the friends and family of James Ibori. The case against James Ibori in terms of the amount to be returned directly from him is still ongoing.
She also states the position of the United Kingdom in siphoning of criminal proceeds from Nigeria to the UK.
That money attained through criminality, through theft, is not welcome in the UK. And we will use the full weight of our law enforcement to crack down on those who think they have found a safe haven. Don't send it to the UK.
On the part of the Nigerian government, the recovery of Ibori loot is a demonstration of political will to fight corruption, as it assures of adequate utilization of the funds.
The Federal Executive Council, under the able leadership of President Muhammadu Buhari, has directed that the instant repatriated funds should be deployed towards the completion of the following legacy projects. 1, the second Niger Bridge. 2, Abuja to Kano Expressway, and 3, the Lagos-Ibadan Expressway, under the coordination of the Nigeria Social Investment Authority to ensure integrity of the process.
The federal government is expected to receive the £4.2 million in 2 weeks from now, based on the MOU signed. What the citizens hope to see is a manifestation of this recovery in terms of better welfare and better economy for Nigeria. From the Federal Ministry of Justice, Abuja, Empress Simon, Channels Television News.
The British government cannot dictate to Delta State what to do with its own money. That is the prerogative of the House of Assembly of that state to appropriate the money that has been paid back into the account of that state, haven't been recovered in the United Kingdom. That's the law. In fact, the trial judge in these cases, the trial judges, if one of them expressed agony, disappointment with the fact that this huge money has left the poverty-stricken state, Delta State in the Niger Delta region. That's not, the court said that. It didn't say, oh, this money belongs to the federal government.
So, I mean,
the federal government, as I said, should be commended for pursuing this matter.
So, should the federal government go ahead and spend this money legally, what will happen?
No, the federal government will have to be challenged. More so that there is a precedent. You cannot treat equals unequally.
Welcome back. Well, apologies for that bad audio, but we do have Mr. Kayode Ajulo back now. So could you go ahead and continue your thoughts on the matter?
Well, thank you very much, Chamberlain. So I think I stopped where I mentioned that the courts in Nigeria, that's starting from the one in Abuja, then from Abuja to Kaduna, and then to Asaba, trying Ibori before eventually he ended up in the United Kingdom. One simple issue that we need to know is that the state government, that is Delta State government, and some other people in Delta State stood against that trial, claiming that no money is missing, even to the point of swearing some affidavit in court to that extent. Now, as it is, Ibori pleaded guilty. I was found wanting and was sentenced and convicted. And in accordance with the UK Proceed on Crime Act, the money was confiscated, and from that point belongs to Her Majesty the Queen of Government. And as it is, but based on the United Nations Convention on against corruption. So there's the way some of this complicated money can be treated, and that is why there is some article, there are some terms that when the participating party needs to have anything to do with it, part of it will be that they may go into an agreement to ensure that this money, since it is a proceed of crime, it is complicated, will not go the same way it comes, how it comes from. That is to say that to ensure that the money will not be rerouted. And that is why you see from what you showed earlier, the government of Nigeria and the United Kingdom had an MOU. And part of the condition in that MOU to safeguard this money is to the fact that first, there will be a civil society that will monitor the expenditure, will monitor this money to ensure that the money will not go the other way, will be for the project that it is. And as it is, and unfortunately, when it comes to international issue, the component state has no say. It is the federal government. And from the way it is, the federal government has already said this is the way this money will be expended. And I don't really know why there is fuss about it. Because morally, it is uncharitable for those that are already clear. You need to see what happened then. Stripping yourself and the naked in the street, fighting, lawyers were being beaten. One or two of my lawyers in Kaduna were touched, were harassed, were assaulted over this matter. And I need to let you know this. Anyway, no, let us stop there. I don't think I need to be personal about this issue. But as it is, sentiment cannot override the law. And that is one thing we have to know. Yes, data people may be sentimental about this, but this is a very clear case. And my fear is this. This first 4.2 million pounds is even just part of it, it's just the beginning. There are more, and my fear is that at the end of the day, Nigeria may lose the entire...
Mr. Ajilo, just before you move on from that point, let me bring in Mr. Monday Obani. Mr. Obani, do you subscribe to that school of thought?
Certainly, Chamberlain, thank you for having me. I do not in any way subscribe to the submission of my learned friend that the money belongs to the federal government. There is none of those laws that he has just cited. The Proceed of Crime Act, that is domiciled in UK, or even the United Nations Convention Against Corruption. None of those laws say that if the money that is actually stolen from a particular state in the country is recovered, that money belongs to the state actor that acted on behalf of the entire country at any point in time. Rather, what actually happened in Ibori's loot is that the federal government had a memorandum of understanding, I think it was in 2016, and when this particular money was recovered, and then an agreement was reached, that agreement was a product of negotiation. In other words, what Britain wants to know is which area of your basic infrastructure are you putting this money? Because over time, much of the money that has been recovered has been relooted. And every any organization now or countries are interested in knowing what purpose you want to use the money you have recovered, illicit money you have recovered, what you want to use it to do. So it's a product of negotiation. It's a product of discussion. It is the federal government that will now tell them, oh, this is what we want to use it for. And I think the federal government made a mistake by not telling them, look, this money belongs to a particular state government.
Okay. We'll try to get Mr. Obani back. But Mr. Ajilo, he stopped at a point where he said that the federal government failed to tell the UK government that, you know what, these monies actually belong to Delta State. So do you think the federal government can be faulted in that line?
No, you know what it is? I think Mr. Ivan is just reporting what he knows nothing about, really. He wasn't a party to the negotiation, so he cannot be reporting what he is not privy to. The situation is so clear, and that is why you can see I limited myself to the issue of law, not to any narrative that can be disjointed, that can be treated. One thing that is so certain is this. Like I said here initially, UK proceed on crime proceed is so clear that once money is confiscated, it goes to the treasury of the United Kingdom. As it is, this money, as it is, I'm talking of law, I'm not talking of sentiment. As it is, this money belongs to United Kingdom, belong to Her Majesty. But because of the fact that it's complicated and because of the fact that the justice must be done, that the money needs to be returned back to must be returned back to the federal government. That is why the United Nations Convention Against Corruption made some terms that must be met. And let me set an example. In 1999, in this case of Ostad, that is the Castan, this about $85 million was looted and was recovered in Geneva. And what happened is this: the United States and Geneva government set up a BOTA, that is a foundation. And the essence of that foundation is to ensure that this money will not be looted. This money will be used for project. And that is why, if you remember what the Attorney General of the Federation said, it's a legacy project. And what are these legacy projects? The Lagos-Ibadan Expressway, the one in the Niger Bridge, and Abuja to Kano. All this belongs to the Federal Republic of Nigeria.
Okay,
I challenged one of my friends yesterday to say,
Mr. Jilo, just a moment. I mean, we'll get to some of the, those issues, but let's try to take this bit by bit, because these are, major points of controversies out there. So let's begin by asking, who exactly is the victim of this stolen fund? Is it the Delta State government or the federal government, or Delta people or the federal government?
Well, from circumstances, by circumstances, first, you may think is the people of Delta State, but their government has rejected to say they are not victim. It is on record. It would have been better if these are the things that's been rumored left and right. But by affidavit evidence, by record in court to say our money is not missing. I'm a Nigerian. I know what it is. Presently, I'm in the UK. I know the way it's been. Nigerian are the victim. Let me say here, because in international fora, the real state actors are it is the federal government, not the component state. And as it is, all Nigerians, even not only Nigeria, the black race, they are victim of this.
Mr. I think that extrapolation is quite interesting, really. I mean, extrapolating to the black race. We could as well say it's the whole world that is a victim of that by way of extrapolation. But, okay, I think we have Mr. Monday Obani back. Mr. Ajala, we'll come back to you, but let's let Mr. Obani land on that point he was making before we lost the connection.
Yeah, so you can hear him say that the entire money now belongs to the entire black race. The logical thing to explain and the most reasonable thing to infer from the factual situation is that the money belongs to Delta State. I don't know this issue of affidavit being sworn by few political elites in Delta now depriving the entire Deltans, majority of Deltans, the money that rightly belonged to them. If you recall, my brothers in the studio, that there was a time the current president never believed that Abacha stole even one kobo from the treasury. Even up to now, President Buhari does not believe that Abacha took any money from the system. But these monies have been returned to the federal government. In fact, monies keep on coming. We keep on receiving alerts, from the grave of Abacha. And never did any of the international, the countries in the world where these monies were domiciled ever said, because the president of the country said that the money no money was taken out of the system, they will not return the money back to Nigeria. We have had instances, we have had evidences, we have factual situations where money that belonged to Bayelsa State was returned to Bayelsa. We have had instances where money that belonged to Plateau State was returned to Plateau State when they were brought back by Britain. So why is the data of Delta different? And they are not saying because some few political elite at that point in time say no money was missing. We should now deny the entire Deltans, majority of the Deltans, millions of Deltans, this money that actually belonged to them because some few political elite, according to him, swore an affidavit. I don't believe that is the factual situation. The factual situation was that Ibori was the governor of Delta State. The factual situation was that Ibori was never the president of Nigeria, was never a minister of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, but governor of a particular state. And so if there was any money taken out of the system, it was money that belonged to that particular state. And the right thing to do is to return that money. As I said earlier, it was a product of negotiation between Britain and Nigeria. And I think that at the point of negotiation, Nigeria should have mentioned that this money belongs to a state government. So even if you are going to put any impact on any project, it must be a project that is domiciled in Delta State. Now, second Niger Bridge is not domiciled in Delta State. The issue of the issue of Ibadan Lagos Expressway is not in Delta State. So not even discussion was held with any of the stakeholders in Delta State as to what project they may want. So I don't want to believe that there was any law that says that money that is coming back to Nigeria must not be given back to Delta State. There is no single law. Let him cite any law that says so. And I don't think that if federal government had mentioned that the project they want to carry out, with domicile in Delta, that Britain would have said, oh, we're not returning money back to you and all that. So there is nothing like that. Let's be logical, let's be factual, and also let's also be reasonable in whatever submission we're making concerning this particular issue. And we have had this, examples I have given you. Bayelsa State, Plateau State money, we return to those states. So why is Delta State an issue? Why are they not doing the right thing?
On that, Mr. Obani, yes, let's get Mr. Ajulo to respond to that. You've cited two issues, Mr. Obani. So, Mr. Ajulo, he cited two issues for your response. One is, what law compels Nigeria to own the money as opposed to, giving it back to Delta State? And secondly, two examples. Joshua Dare of Plateau State, Alami Esia of Bayelsa State, both routes were returned to their different states. How do you respond?
Well, thank you very much. Let me start with the issue of the Alami Esia and Joshua Dare. In these two cases, it is on record that the state government, first, if you remember, the administrator of Plateau State really joined the matter against Zaire to ask that the money should be returned to Plateau State. Then in the matter of Alami Esia, then I think it was the President Obasanjo and President Goodluck Jonathan happened to be the government. In these two states, the two states never deny that this is what the former principal did. But in this Delta State, the issue is this. Let me remind us of one thing. The essence of this procedure is to ensure that the money so looted and so confiscated will not be relooted again. I think the guarantee should now be, and what I respect my brother, my friend, should be saying is that how will it guarantee the fact that even this money should go to Delta State?
We'll come to that. We'll come to that part of we'll come to that part of relooting, because that's also structural and cardinal to the conversation. So, but go back to the issue of law that he mentioned. You have cited the fact that the money, that's confiscated by the state in the UK belongs to Her Majesty the Queen. Now, the Queen is supposed to give it, has volunteered to give it back to Nigeria. What should Nigeria do? Isn't it just almost like common sense? I don't know. To just return it to Delta State?
Law.
Yes. So what's the law?
Let me read. Thank you. You asked for a law. Article 57.5 of the United Nations Convention Against Corruption. Now, let me tell you what the article said. It said, where appropriate, the SP, that is the state party, may also give special consideration to concluding agreement, mutually acceptable to arrangement on a case-by-case basis for final disposal of the confiscated property. That means that what that one means is that the state, that is party, should consider the circumstantial, the issue that led to this. And that's what we're saying, that this thing is not the record science that once the money is recovered, it will be taken back to where it is taken from. And that is, and apart from that, Nigeria we are common law courts, we are common law country, and we did on precedent. The precedent of this, that's why I mentioned the case in 1999. In this case of Oriel, this is a money that is being recovered by a federal republic of Kazakhstan. What happened in that matter is that, having known that this money, because even from the face of it, it is so clear that this money belongs to that country. But because of United Nations, United States and Geneva, that the Geneva government knew that this money will never get to the people. What they did is to sign agreement that between Bota Foundation. Bota Foundation is to get some trustees within the state, within the country, and then use the Bota Foundation to distribute the money on three areas. First, the infrastructure. Second, the education. Then third, on their civil society. This is what it is. And that is why when we talk of the law, I've cited 2 laws. First, the law, the legislation, that is the term and agreement of that convention, or the United Nations Convention. Then the second thing by precedent. As it is, we are not saying, the Nigerian government is not saying that the Delta State will never have anything to do with it, but to guarantee, to safeguard that this money will go to the right point. That is why, if you remember, the first thing in that agreement is that a civil society group must be on ground to monitor how this money will be expended.
If the federal government has already said this is what the money is going to be spent on, where then is the role, is the consideration of the states in all of this?
I said something some minutes ago. Let us look at the project. We are talking of legacy projects. Lagos-Ibadan Express.
Mr. Ajulo, we will come to those projects. Just a moment. We will come to those projects, because this is not the first time the federal government will say this recovered money is going to be used for these specific projects that you have mentioned. And we have also heard a number of times that one loan or the other is procured for one project or the other. But let's go back to Mr. Ubani to respond to some of the things that you have said. Mr. Ubani, he cited 2 laws. How do you respond?
Thank you, my brother, Makinde. It's important we listen to him. I listened to him. I didn't see any provisions in those laws. The Proceeds of Crime Act in Britain, it means that anytime somebody brings an illegitimate money into that country, Britain will do everything that is humanly possible on recovery to return that money back to the country where that money comes from. They don't take it. And that's why Britain said we don't need the money. So that act never in any way specified that whenever you are returning money, you must return it to the country, and the country must not return it to wherever it comes from. That law never says so. Even the convention, the United Nations Convention against Corruption, which he also mentioned, there is no such provision. I wanted him to cite where it was stated that if a money is recovered and money is taken from a state government in any country, for the fact that the people, the political elite say, oh, that money was not money was missing, then that money should not be returned to that particular state. He never cited any law like that. What I said earlier is, when you recover such money by any country, because of the bilateral treaty you have entered into with those countries, you have to sit down and negotiate and discuss what project, because they know over time that money can be rerouted. And there was nothing wrong for federal government of Nigeria to say, oh, we have projects in Delta State because that is where that money, came from. We need to, invest that money there. And there is no way Britain would have told them, oh, no, we're not returning that money because you want to go and invest that money in Delta State. But our federal government now.
Yeah, and again, but okay, I'm sure we'll get Mr. Ubani back. But Mr. Ajulo, one of the things that he has said over and over again is this money was looted from Delta State. Shouldn't it just go straight back without any conversations?
Yeah, so without any conversation with Delta. They never had any conversation with Delta and say, look, we have this money we are recovering. We want to take it back to any project you have. Can you give us any project? They never mentioned that. So
okay. Mr. Ubani, just a moment. Mr. Ajulo, want to respond to that? The money was stolen from Delta State. Shouldn't it just be returned to Delta State by the federal government?
Well, thank you very much. Mr. Ubani has keep on saying about the few elites, forgetting that here we're talking of the government of Delta State, who today sworn to uphold and to ensure the welfare of the people of Delta State. As it is, are we now saying that the money should go back to the same people? It's so obvious that the money will be related. That is the position. And like I said, when he mentioned that one never cited any law, that the Article 57.5 I mentioned talked about special circumstances, particularly in this case. The circumstance is so clear that this is a special circumstances that the money taken to Delta, we know what will become of it. And that is why we raised for the second question. We raised the second issue of what happened in 1999 between the United States and in Geneva. That is the Republic of Carpenter. And what matters most here is this. Yes, we know that this money belongs to Nigeria. And the Nigerian government has talked about the legacy project, a simple project that we know that affects everybody in Nigeria. I've been asking this question, that in any of these projects, which one can we say the Delta State people, Delta State region did not have anything to do with it? Or are you now saying that the money should return to the same Delta State government?
Okay, Mr. Ajula.
That first denied that nothing.
Just quickly, so are you saying, in essence, that if indeed the political elites at that point or the government had said, well, money was looted, then the money would be returned or should be returned to Delta State?
It would have been better. And quickly, let me remind you of
I need you to answer that. If they had said that money was indeed looted, then would you say that that money should be returned to Delta State?
To some point, I will say that. And quickly, let me remind you.
Okay, so Mr. Ajula, just a moment. You will make that point. Just let's stay with this one, because clearly you are basing your decision on that statement. But would it surprise you to know that indigents of Delta State actually petitioned the EFCC saying that money has been looted?
Yeah. The indigent of Delta State that petitioned the EFCC, well, the petition the EFCC through me. And that is why I mentioned those people, that the people that made petition, that is led by Chief Ike Clark, they are still alive. And that is why I said in part of my memo that even if there should be anything that they believe that should go to the Delta State, special trustee, special arrangement should be done. But to send this money to Delta State government, we all know what will happen to that money.
So wait, they petitioned through you, meaning you believed in their case and you argued on their behalf that indeed money was looted. Is that right?
But what I'm saying is this.
No.
We should understand one thing.
No, Mr. Ajula, yeah, we'll come to what you're saying. Yeah. But could you just shed light on that point, please?
What I said earlier is this. Some people of Delta State, led by Chief Ike Clark, petitioned the EFCC that money, that Ibori looted their money. Now, the government, I'm talking of government, and you know what government means, that's the embodiment of the entire Delta State, denied any money limit. Not only that, they denied that.
Sorry, it says that...
Mr. Bani, just hold on, Mr. Bani. Hold on, we'll come to you, but Mr. Ajula, I'm trying to understand your point. You said they petitioned through you that money was indeed missing, and you argued their case. Wasn't that the case?
Yes. Okay, that is the case. But in courts, what happened, what is on record today, is the fact that the government, that is the government, I'm not talking of few citizens, the government denied that no money is missing. Now, the question I've been saying is this, and this is my position. If this money has to be returned, as being clamored by that should be returned to Delta State, who will superintend the money?
Okay, before you get to that point, no. As you know, that was not part of the law. You said you're sticking to the points of law. But when you then say, as my colleague asked you, that if the state, or if he had said, yes, money was looted, then they would have returned it to the state government. And you said to some point you agree with that. First, you need to tell us, to what point do you agree with that? And secondly, if that were the case, what then happens to the law that you cited, the Article 57? Does that invalidate that Article 57?
Certainly invalidate it, because like I said, we have to make these two distinctions. The few people that said the money were missing are different from the government. When we are talking of government, the embodiment, that is the one recognized. And the question now is this: if you are saying that the money should be returned to Delta State, to who? To the same government. Government is continuing. As it is, government is in denial. And that is why I quickly tried to explain what happened in 2016 by the Federal Court in Abuja, that says that the sister recovered money
but Mr.
should
Ajula,
not be given to Delta State.
Is the government on trial?
The government is not on trial, but the question here is this: if the money has to be returned to Delta State, is it you or Chamberlain that will receive the money? It is the government of Delta State.
Isn't that immaterial? Isn't that immaterial to the extent that the government is not on trial?
But no, but again, what we have to know is this:
yes or no?
The essence of that convention The essence of that convention today is to ensure that the looted money will not be looted. It's so obvious, so apparent, that if this same money should go back to the government of the...
All right, in other words, okay, well, assuming without conceding that that's the point, when Swiss and several other governments returned the looted Abacha funds to the federal government, so how do we then say, did they argue that to ensure that monies will not be looted? What happened in that case?
But I know it's not record. Irrespective of anybody who will say that federal government, Nigerian federal government, never denied that Abacha money is looted. If a word is ascribed to President Buhari when he was campaigning, I know those are all right,
Mr. Ajulo, pardon us. We need to go to break, but just hang on. Mr. Bani, hang on as well. You'll respond when we return in a moment. Welcome back. Well, Mr. Mondo Bani, could you go ahead and respond? Yes, you're back now. You can go ahead. Okay, I think it seems to have frozen on us. And so, yeah, Kaide, we're going to say something.
He's in transit, so you expect that. But, Mr. Ajulo, while we'll try to get Mr. Bani back, a couple of issues you have raised, really, and just to be clear and simplify it, because there's been a lot of legal terms, jargons going around, but just let's simplify it for Nigerians. So you agree, just to be clear, you agree that the money was stolen from Delta State, am I right?
Yes, I agree that the money was stolen from Delta State, but that is not the issue yet.
No,
the issue is the law.
I think yes is good enough, Mr. Ajulo. I want to simplify this for the viewer. So you agree that it was stolen from the Delta State government, okay? And you also agree with this judgment when His Lordship Ndukwanya JCA defined restitution as an act of giving back to a person something that was lost or stolen, or paying him for the loss. By the way, this was in the case of Emmanuel Nwude versus federal government of Federal Republic of Nigeria and others. So do you agree with this judgment regarding restitution?
No, certainly I agree with it, but you know, most of the cases, they cannot be the same. I think
so you agree that if restitution means that you return to the person it was stolen from, if we were to just juxtapose, restitution in this case will also mean returning to the Delta State government. Am I right?
There'll be a little problem there. The problem here is this: when we talk of restitution is equitable. And when it comes to, if you come to equity, you must come with a clean hand. As it is now, whosoever that asks for restitution, the hand must be clean. Delta State government, the hand not clean till now. And these are the things we have to be sure of. These are the things we have to canvass. Cases may sound the same, but no case you can't see.
Sorry, how do you mean that the Delta State government's hand is not clean?
It is not clean in the sense that till today, like I said earlier, government is in continuum. Government is in perpetuity. The Delta State government, they are in denial. It will be uncharitable for you to say that your money is not missing, for you to be on record to even...
But Mr. Ajulo, isn't that why we have courts? Isn't that why we have courts? The court has decided that money was indeed stolen. So isn't it immaterial if anybody out there says money was not stolen?
Yes, money was indeed stolen. And as at the time that the money was indeed stolen, the same courts, having said that the money was indeed stolen, has already ordered for forfeiture of that money to acquaint the Majesty government. That is what it is. So by law, this is not what Kayode, this is what Kayode.
Ajulo, where did court say money was stolen from? Was it stolen from the federal government or the Delta State government, or from the black race or the whole world?
But again, if I
where did the court say money was stolen from, Mr. Ajulo?
No,
was it from the Delta State government, the federal government?
Best to my knowledge,
yes.
Best to my knowledge, the court did not say that. But what happened in that matter is that when Ibori was arrested in UK for money laundering, Ibori pleaded guilty. Ibori pleaded guilty. It is a case of, in a situation which we are traveling out of this country, you are asked to declare your money, and you refuse to declare that money. The money you refuse to declare, if you are caught, will be forfeited to federal government. And I'm sure nobody will ask you where the money comes from or not. But by record,
Second, Mr. Ajulo, when he pleaded just when Ibori pleaded guilty, to what did he plead guilty? What was the charge to which he pleaded guilty?
One of the charges is money laundering and moving unauthorized money to Nigeria.
Well, in the build-up to the case, one can assume that definitely he took the money from a particular coffer.
Yes.
Delta State, assumably?
Yes, in the build-up to the case, certainly yes.
Delta State, assumably?
Yes.
Now, in the spirit of the judgment card I read to you earlier, shouldn't it just go back to where it was taken?
That is where the issue is. Like I said earlier, I tried to
know why that
explain
is an issue. But let's go back to Mr. Obani. Hope he's there now. Let's speak to just one more thing, because this will just keep going round and round on this particular thing. There's also the issue of what use government has decided to put this money. Mr. Ajulo was trying to raise it earlier when government is saying that they intend to use the money for those legacy projects, Lagos-Ibadan Expressway, Abuja-Kaduna or Abuja-Kano Road, and Second Niger Bridge. Meanwhile, I'm wondering how is that even, a thing, because previous resources from various places as well have been assigned to the same thing. What's your take? Mute your mic.
Okay. Are you hearing me now? Sorry, I'm sorry about that.
Please go ahead.
Are you hearing me now?
Yes, please go ahead.
Okay. I listened to the Attorney General of the Federation, Mr. Malami, Senior Advocate of Nigeria. He was very explicit why the money should not be returned to Delta. He never mentioned the fact that the political elites there swore an affidavit and said that no money was missing. The reason he gave was Ibori was convicted under a federal legislation. That is the argument. And for that purpose, they have entered into a negotiation with Britain that they will now invest that loot on legacy projects. In other words, it was a subject of negotiation. I keep on saying it. It was not something that Britain imposed and said, look, don't return this money to Delta State because of the fact that some few people swore an affidavit and said no money was missing. It was a product of negotiation. So at that point of negotiation, Nigerian government could have also told Britain that we have legacy project domiciled in Delta and we want to use that money there. That could have been done. Even if they have taken 20% and say 80% of that money, we are going to use it to develop infrastructural deficiencies in Delta State, it would have made more meaning to people. But for you now to say that, oh, because of the fact that few people swore an affidavit, and I'm very happy he even contradicted himself, saying that Delta people wrote through him. Delta people wrote through him. In other words, it wasn't all the Deltans that said that no money was missing. It was few people that Ibori had a hand in bringing into power. Ordinarily, we said there was no money missing because that was the organ. But in the light of the revelation, yes.
Let me bring this in as we wind down. Now, if you argue that the money should be returned to Delta State as a result of what you say, the funds came from there. Yeah. How about this case? Remember the $15 million allegation that former AFCC chairman, Mr. Ribadu, said the former Delta State governor, Ibori, bribed him with? Federal High Court Abuja also ruled at that time that the funds be returned to the coffers of the federal government and be captured in the 2012 budget. How about that?
That was a subject of litigation, and there was a court pronouncement. That was a subject of litigation, and there was a pronouncement. Is there any pronouncement now against this money coming to Delta State by either international court or by any court in Nigeria? There's no such judgment. That was the product of a litigation. Somebody went to court, and it was decided that, oh, you wanted to use this money to bribe no Ribadu, and you deny that you never in any way bribe him. But in the same vein, it's a subject of contention.
So perhaps in the same vein, Mr. Obani. So is there is there a court judgment also that says this money should go to Delta State government in the same vein?
No. In the same vein, this is logical. Where does that money, or where did the money come from? That's the first question you should ask. And then if you now answer logically that the money comes from the Delta State Treasury, then it will become natural that money should be returned to where it is taken. I have cited Article 35 of the same United Nations Convention Against Corruption. It says that money must be returned to the victims. Who are the victims of this particular corruption? It is the people of Delta State. So naturally, that money should go to them. But the other thing you mentioned, Yes. The other one you mentioned was the subject of litigation. That was a process, court trial, and court now made a pronouncement. But in this one, there is no law. There is no judgment that says that money should not be returned to Delta
Okay,
State
gentlemen, we need to rest our case at that point. Would you take both of you, Mr. Monday Obadi, former second vice president of the NBA, and Dr. Kayode Ajulo, who is also a legal practitioner. Gentlemen, thank you both for talking to us today.
It's been our pleasure. Thank you very much.
All right, guys.
Well, very quick one. Well, I think we should take a quick background to the next conversation on
it's got to do with
energy.
oil.
Yeah. Yes, and it's a lot of money too.
Nigeria, as an oil-producing country, is a strong contributor to global energy supply. Whilst it remains relevant in oil output in the OPEC configuration, it has, as a strategic national decision, allotted 445,000 barrels of daily crude production to its 4 refineries located in Port Harcourt, Kaduna, and Warri. The founders' idea about the 445,000 barrels allocation was to ensure that there is enough feedstock to be refined or distilled to produce at least 5 derivatives, which will guarantee availability of products and value addition. But over the years, these refineries have not lived up to the billing. Soon, TAM, turnaround maintenance, became a buzzword, but for the huge amount of monies apparently spent, but with little results to show. From the records under the Transparency, Accountability, Performance Excellence, the Group Managing Director NNPC Malam Mele Koyari declared that all 4 refineries were functioning below capacity and it had to be necessarily stopped and it had to be shut down from operating altogether. He gave 2 reasons for this. One is that the delivery of crude oil to these refineries is completely challenged as the pipeline network has been completely compromised by vandals. Secondly, is that the rehabilitation has become necessary because turnaround maintenance, making it a colossal loss to capacity in the refinery. For decades, the refineries have performed below optimal levels despite the huge resources earmarked for their rehabilitation. This has resulted in importation of petroleum products for domestic use for many years. For instance, the Port Harcourt Refinery Company recorded a total revenue of 1.45 billion in 2018 with expenses of 24.4 billion, resulting in a gross loss of 22.58 billion. Figures on the actual amount Nigeria has expended on turnaround maintenance of the refineries have always been a subject of controversy. Reports, however, say Nigeria may have spent about $25 billion on the refineries. According to a recent report by the NNPC, a cumulative loss of 123.25 billion naira in 10 months, January to October 2019, was recorded. The Port Harcourt Refinery, a 210,000 barrels per day complex, is made up of 2 refineries. The old refinery has a nameplate capacity of 60,000 barrels per day and was commissioned in 1965, while the new plant with nameplate capacity of 155,000 barrels per day was commissioned in 1989. The plant utilizes Bonny Light crude oil to produce liquefied petroleum gas (LPG), premium motor spirit (PMS), dual-purpose kerosene (DPK), automotive gas oil (AGO), low-pour fuel oil (LPFO), and high-pour fuel oil (HPFO). It may be the dawn of a new operation as the Federal Executive Council has earmarked in the first phase a whopping sum of $1.5 billion over an 18-month period for a total rehabilitation of the Port Harcourt Refinery in a bid to bring it up to a 90% capacity. Olu Phillips, Channels Television News.
Mr. Olabode Shomi joins us this morning. He's an energy consultant, and let's have a conversation on the new proposal by the federal government for the repair works on PH refineries. Thanks for joining us this morning, Mr. Shomi. First of all, when this news came, what came to your mind?
Good morning. Thanks for having me. I think if there's anything, the refineries are one area that has not been subject to a lot of scrutiny by stakeholders, including the media and virtually everybody. If you recall, about a year or 2 ago, the NNPC released some of its figures, and in there, they spoke to a few billions that went into the refinery and for which the organization was running at a loss, which means that irrespective of the fact that whether there's been an appellation to the fact that rehabilitation was going on there, there's a lot of money that's gone into the works in the refinery. But that's that as a background. But having said that, there is the policy trust of the government that the refineries will be privatized. I mean, this goes along with the thinking and the spirit behind the PIB. So the question will now be that if the refineries will be privatized, what will be the logic or the thinking that will enable us to spend this amount of money at this time to get the refineries to a position of 90%? You will recall, and very carefully, that the wordings used is not that the refineries will start working at 100%, but at the 90%. So what will be the logic of getting this amount of money spent for a refinery that will now be at 90%? So, I mean, those are some of the things that I was thinking about and all that. And then would the privatization process really go on? I mean, those are things that we need more information about.
Well, perhaps
that
this
would be my own.
Yeah, perhaps this follow-up is a trick question, Mr. Shomi, so get ready. Are you for or against?
To be honest, it's not it's a knowledge-based question. In simple terms, there's a need for more information to be able to decide what is right. And I'll explain what I mean by that. If the thinking is that at the end of the day, the refineries will be privatized, definitely I will be against. However, if the thinking is that the government believes that with a new spirit, with a new drive, that we can get the refineries working, I'll be for it, primarily because it also has to offer some kind of competition to the Dangote refinery that is going on, because you cannot have a private company running a monopoly. So there has to be some kind of competition. So from that aspect, yes, that there should be, I mean, it is a welcome development. So it's a case where we need more information in terms of what is really happening here to decide if it's really a needed thing for Nigeria at this time.
But one of the information already put out is that this is not just another turnaround maintenance. It's larger, it's broader. I mean, that's the understanding we have already. Would you say that, this would be significant compared to previous turnaround maintenance activities of government, successive governments, that hasn't really turned around anything?
Government is a continuum. So I think we also need to put that to government every time so that you don't have one regime passing the buck to another regime. So whenever government, whether it's a previous government or a current government, it is government. So we need to hold them to that responsibility. But in the light of the fact, it is the devil is in the details. That they have said that this is a more elaborate maintenance really means nothing. What matters is once this maintenance happens, will the refinery be working like it was when it started? Will it be working at 90%? 100% capacity? How many? What's the volume of DPK, LPFO, PMS that will be coming out? Those are the specifics. That's where it is relevant to the people. Any other thing is just trying to bury people in semantics. And that really is the concern. The real concern will be that in all this that we're doing, in all the things that is happening, what will be the relevance of all of this to the volume of petrol that comes into the country? We should also realize that our greatest expenditure of forex today is not even the goods that we use. It's used in importation of PMS and DBK and AGO. So if we can get these refineries working and reduce importation by 50%, significantly, we are going to curb inflation very significantly. So these are things that needs to get the attention of everybody, not just the people in the industry. It needs to get the attention of economists. It needs to get the attention of those who are against corruption. Whoever has an interest for a stable, non-inflation economy needs to be looking at all these things. And so, those are things that need to come online.
You've heard and seen reactions from various people. One of them, the governor of Rivers State, saying, well, we had various promises regarding this and really nothing to show for it. And my concern really is, are we solving the real problem? Because, we've thrown money at the refineries time and again. checking the front page of the dailies, you see trillions of naira we have thrown at these refineries. So, I mean, $1.5 billion is also another tranche of, I mean, the series of funds we have thrown at it. Does this really solve the problem? Because for decades, the refineries have not worked. For those decades, we have thrown money at the refineries, yet they have not worked. So does it solve the fundamental problem of refining in Nigeria? Or let me just start by asking, what is the fundamental problem of getting our refineries to work?
Okay, now, to every project, whether it's oil and gas related or not, there's a technical aspect to it. Then, of course, there's the financial aspect to it, and then there's the structure, processes of it, because all projects tend to be structural. That's why you have project management, development, and all that. Now, with respect to the refineries, our problems are not technical. Nobody has said that we have issues with the refineries actually producing quality LPFO or quality PMS and all that. So they are not technical issues. The devil is in the fact, they're in the economics of it, they're in the finances. In other words, what is actually being spent and what. So there is a need for an audit process. But this audit process is not from the system to correct itself. It is from the external stakeholders to put pressure by asking a critical mass of questions that will put pressure on the stakeholders to deliver. An example is in the power sector. One of the reasons why despite the many issues that bedevil the power sector is the fact that there's a critical mass of Nigerians that ask questions every day about the sector. And this puts pressures on stakeholders to ensure that certain progresses are made, irrespective of how difficult the issues are. The issues with the refineries are not as complicated as the power sector. What has happened is the fact that whatever information comes out to the public, nobody challenges it, nobody investigates it, nobody verifies it. We spend such an amount of money, nobody knows. So we are now in a case where we are having questions that, we're having comments from people that may be less than honest, and we are not putting enough pressure to interrogate and question the sources and the data from these figures. And that is why it looks like a recurring decimal. We need to look at the issues. Whether...
if I get you correct, you're saying that people should pay more attention, ask more questions, put more pressure on the government, the NNPC, the Ministry of Petroleum Resources regarding these refineries. Am I right?
Absolutely. There's no other shortcut.
Okay, so you spoke about certain monopoly earlier on and saying that, the government should not allow monopoly. But at this rate, it will be a private business versus, or at least in competition with government. Isn't it meant to be all private driven such that the monopoly can be really broken? Because let's be honest, you can't have federal versus private, or at least in competition with private, and the private will not always be leaner and more effective, more innovative. So shouldn't the doors be open to more private participation instead?
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's the ethos of the free market enterprise. One of the bedrocks of democracy is the free market enterprise. The world has tried all forms of government, theocracy, we've tried communism, and we found out over the centuries that democracy offers the best form of governance for human beings. And on the bedrock of democracy is the free market enterprise. So we need, if we want the nation to survive, if we want the structures of business to be lasting, to be productive, there must be a genuine free market enterprise. So the entry barriers into the refining sector needs to be lowered, and government needs to encourage players who lack capacity. So the bailout funds of government does not just have to go to big players; it can also go to small players. And if there's a need for help to get refineries started in this area, but it is important that there must be competition sufficient to what is needed by the environment, because the forces of entrepreneurship is started in the hearts and the minds of people, but it is supported by the environment and backed up by government so that the society can be productive. And these same principles need to be repeated within the downstream sector. And that is why it is important for the prosperity and the survival of Nigeria that people who are willing to get into those areas of business do get into the business.
Okay. All right, well, Mr. Jomi, this is definitely conversation that's literally just starting. I'm sure that in the next coming days, more will have to be said. But for now, we have to thank you very much for being a part of this conversation. Olabode Shome is an energy consultant. Thank you so much for your time and thoughts.
Thank you.
All right, so yeah, let's delve right into taking a look at some of the feedback. I think the first one comes from Yomi, so it'll just pop up on the screen, and then so that is Yomi's first tweet. He says, "Well, look, he says, Barrister Obani seems to be emotional in his submission. I beg to ask, has Delta State government established that ex-governor looted state funds? Did Ibori admit that the loot belongs to Delta State? Did Delta State join FG in the case with the UK government?" More questions than answers.
I imagine he's also another counsel, social media counsel in this one. But, I mean, interesting question. This one from me, Oluwole Isaac. We must keep reminding ourselves that Nigeria is a federation made up of individual federating states. Delta money can't be used for any purpose without the approval of Delta House of Assembly. Even the governor cannot give such consent. It's called Federal Republic of Nigeria.
That makes some sense, right?
Also another council.
Well, let's see if this is another council. Ayo says, I do not believe the Ibori loot should be returned to Delta State, but it should be used for projects only in Delta State by the federal government. Since there's a consensus that one way or another, it should go to Delta.
So is federal government going to be executing a state government project?
That would be interesting.
What happens to Federation of Separation of Powers?
Federal projects in Delta State?
It still belongs to federal government.
And it's still returning to Delta State.
Well, Uja, talking about the drug case, he says, fighting drugs is very easy if we are sincere and serious about it. Disrupt and stifle supply, and you won't have a problem. If there's huge demand, you need both government and political will to disrupt the supply chain. Interesting.
So one more. Olagujo Oladele says the growing population of vulnerable youths in our society is scary.
Yeah.
People now can concoct drugs, making a variety of abused items more readily available. Drug addiction is complex because addicts think drug use is an effective coping mechanism to deal with issues. Now that's brilliantly put.
I guess he answered your question.
Yeah.
Why drugs? Why people use drugs in the first place?
And you know, sometimes I just wonder, we're old school because you need to see what happens. These things are developing so very fast. Even parents can't keep tabs on how these things happen. Schools are trying it. Schools ban them from taking them at clubs or any public gathering. You know what they do? They take them before they go to those gatherings.
Alternatively, they create other drugs, other forms of addictions.
And mix things you don't consider as substance, substance abuse. Wow. Crazy, man.
It's a lot of work. Yeah. Well, that's the show today. Thank you so much for being a part of the conversation. Amayo Makide, have a wonderful day.
Oh, please stay away from drugs. I'm Kayode Kikyodu.
So we'll see you again tomorrow, 7 a.m. West African time. Have a great day. I'm Chamberlain. That's all.